Governor, Madam Treasurer, Mr. Comptroller, we have 15 items on the Secretary's agenda this morning. Prepare any questions you might have.
I'd like to just highlight item 8, please.
This is, I think the Stadium Authority is here. This is school construction. We have 8, 9, 10, and 11.
I don't really have questions about it. I just wanted to say this is one of 4 requests before us today from the 21st Century Schools program, seeking approval for renovation of Govans Elementary and Medfield Heights Elementary, and I'm delighted to support both of these projects. I just wanted to talk about the fact that the approval of school construction funding is one of the most important functions of this Board of Public Works. We provide the fiscal oversight and accountability that taxpayers expect and deserve. And this board, which is made up of the state's top fiscal leaders, is charged with overseeing the expenditure of billions of dollars in public school construction funds. However, once again, there are some in the legislature playing political games by attempting to remove all oversight authority from this board. Their stated purpose is simply that it's politics, and it's a personal vendetta against my colleague, the Comptroller. Yesterday, the House of Delegates passed a bill, which was a good bill, to modernize school construction. It was a proposal which we supported, but they snuck in an amendment here at the end of the legislative session without any hearings to strip the authority from this fiscal body and to turn over all authority for billions of dollars in state taxpayer money for school construction to an unelected, unaccountable group of hand-picked lobbyists, political donors, and people with conflicts of interest in the school system. At a time when citizens all over the state are crying out for more accountability and more oversight. The former Baltimore County superintendent is going to jail. Another former Baltimore County school official has been indicted. Another is serving as an informant to a federal corruption investigation of a sitting senator. The State Board of Education just last week voted again last week unanimously to conduct a second investigation into illegal grade tampering in Prince George's County. Howard County's former superintendent left in disgrace after misleading parents and teachers about mold in the classrooms. This year, we introduced our Accountability in Education Act to establish an independent inspector general in the Department of Education with the power to investigate allegations of corruption and unethical behavior in the schools. At the request of the State Board of Education, just last week, we submitted a supplemental budget providing them with $2.5 million to pay for the Education Monitoring Unit and Office of Compliance and Oversight. The fact that the legislature would choose now to corrupt a process that has worked effectively and delivered transparency, accountability, and oversight on these expenditures for 50 years is simply outrageous. Mr. Comptroller?
Yes, thank you, Governor. I would like to echo the Governor's comments. It is utterly shameful that legislative leadership would hijack the work product of a commission that has spent the last 2 years studying how we can modernize Maryland's public school facilities to retaliate, according to the chairwoman of the Appropriations Committee on the floor of the House, against me specifically. And speaking of Chairwoman McIntosh, let me just take a second, Governor, to correct the record, because there were some statements made on the House floor yesterday that couldn't have been farther from the truth. It was amazing, really, to hear a legislator from Baltimore City continue to provide political cover the city schools officials who failed to do their jobs and have the audacity to blame this board for the heating crisis that transpired earlier this year. Let me just say very clearly, it was a lie told to my former colleagues down on the floor. Even though the chairwoman knew what she was saying didn't have an ounce of truth, she said it anyway to advance a political agenda that is beneath the dignity of the institution of the Maryland General Assembly. So let's set the record straight. Yes, this board did withhold $5 million from Baltimore City to compel action on the dozens of school facilities that did not have air conditioning. Why? Because for 8 or 10 years, I'm sick and tired of hearing about kids and teachers who are literally getting sick and unable to learn or work properly because of the persistent failure of leadership on North Avenue, which Chairwoman McIntosh and some of her colleagues are willing to shamelessly provide political cover for. But what Chairwoman McIntosh conveniently left out was the fact that the $5 million was withheld from the city for only 6 months, and by the time they came back to this board, they had a plan of action to finally address the lack of air conditioning in their schools. The rest of the state has air conditioning. What about the city? When Chairwoman McIntosh didn't tell you was that when we withheld that $5 million, Baltimore City Public Schools had over $10 million sitting in their contingency fund, and guess what? They didn't spend a penny from those funds to address the HVAC problems that have gone unaddressed for decades. What Chairwoman McIntosh didn't tell you is the fact that $5 million doesn't even come close to the cost of what it takes to replace an HVAC unit in one of those schools that closed this past January due to lack of heat. In fact, this board approved an HVAC unit replacement for the historic Samuel Coleridge Elementary School, which I visited 2 years ago. And because city schools were unable to get this project under contract in time, that school never got its heating system replaced. And in case you were wondering, the projected cost to replace that unit was $7.5 million. So, Governor, I'm absolutely 100% not apologetic for standing up for those kids who are forced to learn in inhumane conditions because of bureaucratic failure and inaction from their legislative representatives. And the fact that Chairwoman McIntosh is justifying her efforts to strip this board of school construction oversight based on inaccurate information and because we've chosen to hold school officials accountable. If that's the motivation, that is extremely disappointing and I'd say disgusting. And Governor, let me say that I think it is absolutely shameful and yes, disappointing that children are being used as political pawns in the inexplicable battle with this board over actions that have directly provided healthier and safer learning environments for our kids. It's shameful and yes, disappointing that in a time when corruption, unethical behavior, and mismanagement continue to occur in public school systems across the state, that legislative leadership wants to reduce transparency and accountability in the way state taxpayer dollars are used and spent by local education systems. It's shameful and disappointing, but unfortunately, it's not surprising. These are the kind of smoke-filled backroom type of actions that cause people to rightly lose faith in their government. That's why people are disgusted with Annapolis. Since the Board of Public Works was granted the authority to distribute school funding, state funding for local school construction projects in 1943, this board has overseen and managed the process to distribute hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars and ensured that these funds are being spent wisely. There's a reason why policymakers at that time entrusted this board, as the governor noted, composed of the state's 3 fiscal officers, the authority to oversee school construction, as opposed to giving it to a panel of unelected bureaucrats and political appointees. Because when it comes to oversight of public funds and ensuring that our kids are learning in school facilities that are safe and healthy, there's no better place than this board to have those discussions. For the thousands of students, teachers, parents, and families across the state who don't follow the Capitol Hill, Washington-style political tactics that are often deployed in this building. Remember, these are last-minute amendments that are suddenly popped into a bill. There's no public hearing, there's no notice, just deus ex machina, they fall from the sky in the committee, and bingo, there they're put in. Plow, they move out. Washington-style political tactics. I'd like to provide some guesses as to why legislative leadership has decided to take this astonishing and highly misguided action. Apparently, some legislators on the first floor have vehement objections to our actions to put some public pressure on local school systems to address serious, in some instances, inhumane conditions in their schools. Apparently, some legislators are upset that this board, composed of 2 statewide elected officials and a very distinguished treasurer elected by the legislature, that we actually listened to the pleas and concerns from the thousands of students, parents, teachers, and families whose phone calls, emails, and letters apparently went unanswered by their school officials and local elected officials. We're talking about 50,000 kids in the Baltimore region who, before this board's leadership, were enduring conditions that are inhumane. Kids who were literally passing out due to heat exhaustion in the summer, and kids who were wearing parkers in their classrooms due to lack of heat in the winter. I can still remember the first time I toured Middleborough Elementary School in Essex, up on the eastern side of Baltimore County, where I heard horrific stories about teachers and students fainting, kids coming home in shirts drenched in sweat, kids who were literally unable to learn in classrooms with an indoor heat index of over 100 degrees. They pleaded with their school officials. They pleaded with their elected officials. And what did they get? Excuses after excuses after excuses. They had one last shot. And that was the Board of Public Works. Thanks to this board's leadership, Middleborough Elementary School is air-conditioned today. Thanks to this board's leadership, the vast majority of HVAC projects have been completed or are being expedited in Baltimore City and Baltimore County. I suspect that thousands of students, teachers, and families are grateful to this board for blowing the whistle on another issue, the mold crisis in the Howard County school system, demanding that those school facilities be taken care of immediately to ensure the safety, health, and welfare of those students, teachers, and staff. It's safe to say that the peace of mind those families enjoy every day their son or daughter walks into their mold-free classroom is due in no small part to the open, transparent forum this board provides. I will most certainly not apologize for any actions in this board's actions on that issue. And this board, long before it was politically convenient for the folks downstairs to get a quote in the record, rebuking the corruption and unethical behavior in the Baltimore County public school systems, we questioned the highly irregular practices of a former Baltimore County superintendent who broke our laws, robbed the trust and confidence of all Baltimore County residents, pled guilty recently to 4 felonies, and is awaiting sentencing. No, I'm not going to apologize for this board's advocacy. We're talking about, and what about the recent indictment of the other top bureaucrat in the system a couple of weeks ago in Baltimore County for bribery? We're talking about ensuring that taxpayer investments in school construction and school maintenance are being used wisely and prudently, because at the end of the day, that's what Marylanders demand and expect from us. That's why they're paying our salaries. So no, I will not apologize for doing my job, because we did our job in demanding better school maintenance. We gave voice to thousands of students, teachers, and parents who rightly expect their school officials and elected officials to do more than just give them more excuses as to why things can't be done. Legislative leadership wants to retaliate. Those are their words. Wants to retaliate by reducing transparency, reducing accountability, reducing public input into the school construction process. Now, I'd like to remind everyone that this isn't the first time the General Assembly has tried to pull this stunt. They've tried to do it over the last 2 legislative sessions by